Okay, testing. Testing, making sure that we're working. You all good? Let me know in chat if y'all can hear me, please. Because this is all a little bit odd. I'm not going to lie. This has all been a little bit weird. Let me know if y'all can hear me now. Y'all should be able to hear me. Testing. Excellent. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to the Raven's Roost, or Raven Reads. If you are new here, I am Raven Knight, and this is the series where I read to you guys. So it has been a while since I did one of these. Truth be told, I usually try to do these every Monday evening. It's basically just a stream where I read to you guys. But I haven't been able to because a lot of different reasons, just a lot of stuff has been going on. And so I haven't been able to do it. But I want to try to get back to it starting tonight. And I wanted to start by reading one of my stories. We are going to finish up Journey to the West eventually. We are going to get back to that. But right now I want to read one of my other stories. So for those of you who don't know this about me, I am a writer. I'm a novelist. I write books. I write stories. I write poems. I write a lot of stuff. Some of it I have published. Others I have not. And on this series, I like to read with you guys some of my work. It's just a chance for me to stretch my writing and reading muscles and share with you guys what I create. You guys have told me that you enjoy this stuff, and so I'm here to share it. And today we're going to be reading one of my books, The Revenant King. We're only going to read the first few chapters because, little news for you, The Revenant King is going to be published. I'm going to be publishing this book. I'm in the process of editing the chapters and fixing them up. Actually, I had been asking Wexra to read the chapters and help me edit them, but she's been super busy with a lot of stuff and hasn't gotten back to me on chapter 2 or 3 yet, so we're going to give her time to, catch up with stuff. But in the meantime, I can at least read you guys what I have. So here's how tonight's going to work. For those who don't know, there are a set of rules. The rules work like this. When I do reading streams, we focus solely on reading. I'm not going to answer questions about games or about movies or about politics or about my thoughts on the upcoming season or about Warhammer. I'm not answering any of those. And if you spam those questions to me, I'm going to time you out. It's that simple, because this is supposed to be about the books. This is supposed to be about the reading. So as we read The Revenant King, this is going to be what we do. That's how it's going to work. The second rule is I do not want any judgment about my reading capability. The fact is, I sound like a guy. I sound like a man. I cannot throw my voice to sound very much like a woman. And so when I read a female part, I ask that you be respectful and not laugh and say, haha, you don't sound anything like you should. Because that's just offensive, and that's rude, especially when I'm trying. And then the third thing is be polite to me and to everyone in chat. This is not a place for us to be inappropriate or rude to one another. Okay? So, let me get my drink real quick, and then we will start reading chapter 1 of The Revenant King. We're probably only going to read 4 chapters tonight, because I've only managed to edit 4 so far. If we enjoy the 4th one and we have time, we'll go to the 5th one. But we will not read too terribly far. Okay? All right. Here we go. The Revenant King, Chapter 1. Anthony Kolinsky was terrified. In fact, he'd never felt more nervous in his life. When his father caught him as a young boy trying to sneak firecrackers into school, not a problem. When he was arrested for shoplifting in college and got kicked out as a result, that didn't bother him. When his wife came at him with a rusty kitchen knife when she found out he'd had an affair, he took care of her without breaking a sweat and quite enjoyed it. Even when the police had a solid lead on his underground meth labs across Green Street, he barely lost sleep over it. Why? Because Anthony Kolinsky was cold-blooded. Everyone knew it, and everyone respected it. It didn't matter if you were a street punk or you were a made man, you knew to respect Kolinsky. He'd earned the moniker Cold Blood Kolinsky because no matter how tough the situation or how tight the scenario, Anthony always managed to slither out of trouble. He had eyes and ears everywhere, and his resources were almost limitless. Anthony lived a lucrative and risky life, but it was that life that made him infamous, powerful, and fearless. Not once in his long career of crime and pushing his luck had Anthony so much as thought about feeling fear. Was he psychopathic? Any shrink who thought so didn't live long enough to offer the diagnosis. Anthony's reputation for brutal efficiency earned him a high place in the criminal underworld. A man with hands in various pockets and with connections that made a proverbial cornerstone in the drug trafficking business. He had suppliers, he had buyers, and he had enforcers to make sure that both of the former party members were able to do their business without anyone getting involved. It's why no one could touch him. It's why his business was airtight. It's why Anthony Kalinsky never felt fear. But now Anthony was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. In his luxurious apartment in Manhattan, where he could view the city from above, a beer bottle in hand and cigar in his fingers, he'd grin and watch as the cars moved aimlessly along between the maze of buildings, streets, and alleys. To him, Manhattan was less of a city or a metropolis and more of a business opportunity. It amused him to watch the pieces move and see which parts he could reach out and touch. But now, he had the windows shut tight, the curtains drawn across them, and outside of his bedroom door were two armed men with agitated and tired expressions. He sat in his bed, so nervous he'd actually forgotten to get undressed, and sweat drenching his gray hair as it matted his balding head. His cold blue eyes darted about the room, leaping at every shadow, frightened of every flutter. His jowls quivered as he fought chattering teeth. The pounding of his heart in his ears itself was messing with him. "Freddie!" he shouted suddenly. There was a grunt from the other side of the door. "Yes, sir," answered a low, sleepy voice. "How are things out there?" "Anything?" Anthony asked, his voice struggling not to quake. "Nothing, sir. It's all clear," Freddie yawned. "Lewis and I ain't seen nothing yet." Good. He lay back and tried to calm himself down. Nothing would happen. Nothing would come. It had to be hard for Freddie, Luis, or any of Anthony's subordinates to contemplate what could finally put the fear of God into cold-blood Kalinsky, the man who feared nothing, who was now jumping at thin air. Where had it all come crashing down for their boss? It all started a week ago, when one of Kalinsky's drug distributors had been found dead, his body hung upside down as blood drained from his throat, a message stuffed in his mouth. The message had been specifically meant for Anthony, who, upon reading it, found the chilling text saying, "You have 1 week, Kalinsky. Turn yourself in, or I come for you." Signed, The Count. At the time, Kalinsky had almost laughed at the threat. It was ludicrous. His distributor was a weakling, a nobody. It didn't matter if one was axed off, he'd just hire a new one. He never took it to heart and made sure that nothing could be found on the body that linked anything back to him. And the next morning, he received word over breakfast that one of his storehouses had been hit. But not by police or FBI, but by someone unidentifiable. And unlike the feds, this one didn't take prisoners. Only 4 men had survived and 1 woman. 5 out of 12. All of them who lived were pale as sheets, shaking in fear, claiming that some shadow had come in. Just a shadow. And there was nothing but screams. They tried shooting the attacker, but it was as if they were shooting a ghost. They hit nothing, and they saw no body to hit. But whatever it was able to touch them. Anthony had gone to see the results of this attack, and the sight was nothing short of a nightmare. Bodies lay strewn in horrifying ways, with expressions of both terror and agony. There was so much blood. It was like a sprinkler of red had been let off in the house. Anthony felt himself becoming nauseous and had to step out for some air. However, as he stepped out to let his cleaners do their job, one approached him with a note. A blood-soaked and torn note found in the open mouth of one of the victims. And this note read similar to the first. "Don't think I can't find you, Kalinsky. I grow weary of waiting. For each day you stall, I hit another one of your houses. The blood won't stop here." Signed, The Count. This got Kalinsky furious. He doubled the crew at every one of his distribution centers. He made sure enforcers were aware of this new threat. He maxed out production of his goods as fast as he could without raising suspicion. If this lunatic wanted to play hero, then he'd suffer for it. But things didn't improve. The next morning, one of his informants was found in his safe house barely alive, his body shaking in terror and mumbling something about red eyes. Horrible red eyes. He was taken to a hospital and treated for shock and several lacerations. When Kalinsky came to visit him, all the young man said was, "He wants you. He wants you. Now, Kolinsky was a little concerned. In a fit of desperation, he started to have all of his men switch safe houses and move their production plants. Any unaccounted for plants or product had to be found and moved, because this attacker knew too much and was out for blood. Another morning, and to Kolinsky's horror, another hit, but this time closer to home. It was becoming frightening, and even Kolinsky's iron will was starting to waver. Who was this person? How did they keep finding him? And why were his armed enforcers unable to even touch the bastard? And all they could say was that they could see a shadow moving, and then blood. "Ah!" Kolinsky cried. He'd heard something tap his window. The cry brought Freddie and Luis running into the room. Both had guns raised. Both were tall. One, Freddie, was a muscular black man with a nappy hair and flat nose and a few stitched scars on his cheek and forehead from scraps on the street. He had a big handgun in his large, meaty fingers, and they were raised, looking for something to shoot. Luis, the other, was rather plump but broad. He had lighter skin and dirty blonde hair that was cut so short he might as well have buzzed it. His eyes darted around almost stupidly as he'd clearly been dozing off. He had his gun out too, but it wasn't raised. Perhaps he was too sleepy to put the effort into it. "What is it? What's wrong?" Freddie demanded hurriedly. Kolinsky pointed to the window and they ran to it, throwing open the curtains. There was nothing but empty night and the lights of the buildings beyond. Only a single bat was flapping around aimlessly in the night, searching for moths. Freddie chuckled and shook his head. "Just a bat hitting the window, boss. It's no big deal." "You're so sure?" Kolinsky asked, his voice barely a murmur. "Yeah, nothing there," Luis added. "Jumping at shadows." "Shut it!" Kolinsky hissed. "I got good reason to jump at shadows. Go back outside. Leave me be." The two men shrugged and walked back out the door, closing it behind them. As he lay back in his bed, he heard another tap and glanced out to see the bat again. "Damn rodent! Get lost!" The bat didn't leave, and Kolinsky had half a mind to get up and go get Freddie to come shoot it, but thought better of it. It was bad enough he was scared shitless, but letting his underlings see him like this? Freddie and Luis were already chuckling at his sudden case of terror, so it would look far worse to ask him to go get rid of vermin like some simpering housewife afraid of a spider. So he got out of bed and scurried to his closet where he kept an emergency pistol. As he dug through the shelf to get it, he heard outside his room a low thud and snoring. Luis must have dozed off again and finally fallen asleep. Cursing under his breath, Kolinsky promised to come up with a good punishment for that moron later. Finally finding the gun, he grabbed the steel, loaded it, and returned to his bedroom to deal with the bat. But the moment he turned to the door again, there was no bat. Only a shadowy figure standing outside his balcony. Fear gripped Kolinsky like a grasping claw of ice seeking to rip out his soul. He let out a shriek and aimed his gun at the figure, only for it to vanish like it had never been there. There was no bat. There was no figure. There was nothing at all. He looked around frantically for a solution. How had the figure gotten on his top-floor balcony in the first place? This room was 5 stories above the ground. There was no ladder. What was going on here? "Freddie! Luis, get in here, you useless bastards!" There was no sound from outside other than the snoring. "I said get in here!" "They won't come." Kolinsky let out a scream of fright, jumping almost 2 feet and spinning around to see the figure from before, standing now inside the room, just past the window barrier. The window door to his balcony was now wide open, the curtains swaying in the evening breeze, and the light of the moon casting a haunting shadow upon the ground, reaching out like claws to grab at Anthony. The figure appeared human, though shrouded in that same shadowy-like aura. His clothes were odd to Anthony. He wore a black leather jacket with a hood over his head to hide his face, though Anthony could make out strands of black hair. He had on fitted jeans, fine boots on his feet. He appeared like he could have been a simple person from the streets, but there was a sophistication to him. He stood straight with squared shoulders, as if standing at attention in the military. Though he wore a leather jacket and hood, it looked expensive. In fact, it looked very professional, and yet of the urban environment at the same time. A strange and unnerving combination of grungy and austere. Perhaps it was the way he stood and composed himself. His hands were behind his back, clasping each other. Though he couldn't see the man's eyes, Anthony could feel a cold glare piercing his soul. "How the hell did you get in here?" Kolinsky shouted, trying to show his strength and gusto. "How indeed?" the stranger asked. He had an accent undercutting his almost amused tone. He spoke with a deep but dignified manner that reminded Anthony Kolinsky of a suave aristocrat. There was the slightest hint of an accent, though the voice oozed with a dark malice that was familiar to him, no matter the language. "Forgive me, but that doesn't seem to be the appropriate question you should ask at this moment." His manner of speech was refined and polite, but with a hint of venom to his voice. "I believe the better question to ask would be, what will you do now that I am here? The manner in which I got in here is irrelevant. I am here, regardless of my means. So, what will you do, cold-blooded Kolinsky?" Anthony was at a loss for words. This murderer was just having a conversation with him. It was as if nothing had happened in the last week. He spoke the way one might discuss a day at work or a family vacation. Anthony slowly reached for his handgun, which had fallen on the bed, in his panicked cry of fright. "That's something I'm considering at this moment, you freak! Where's Freddie and Luis? You bribed them?" "Your subordinates are asleep," the intruder answered. "They'll remain that way until I leave. But let's not worry about them. We have another pressing matter to discuss." "Fine! What is it you want?" Kolinsky demanded. "Out with it already!" "What do I want?" the figure asked. Kolinsky froze, his hand only inches from his gun. He could grab it and shoot. He could blow this man to kingdom come, but something made him stop. Something made him want to hear. He wanted to get a peek into who he was dealing with. The intruder sighed and seemed to stare off into space a moment. "What I want," he repeated, "is not something I will ever obtain. It is as the stars, forever beyond reach, yet always within sight. But my desires are not important, least of all to a man like you." The figure reached into the recesses of his jacket and pulled out a flip cell phone, tossing it to Kolinsky, who caught it and stared at it a moment, curious. "What the hell is this?" "Call the police and turn yourself in. This is your only chance. Refuse, and I will dispense my own justice," the stranger hissed. Perhaps it was the cold arrogance with which the stranger spoke, but Kolinsky for a brief moment rediscovered his nerve. He finally moved, raised the gun in his hand, aiming it at the figure, and he unloaded the magazine into the stranger's chest. Every bullet found their mark, and the young man hit the ground hard as blood gushed from his wounds. "Fucking trash!" Kolinsky hissed, breathing heavily. It'd been a long time since he'd had to actually shoot someone himself. Felt good to remember the sensation to kill. His hands still shook, but at least the bastard was finally dead. "You fucked with the wrong guy, didn't you?" He turned to call in Luis and Freddie. As he walked to the door, he heard movement and spun around, and what he saw made his air catch in his throat. Kolinsky was a man valued for his tough exterior and ability to face any problem with bravery and collectedness. But now, he was on the verge of wetting his pants. The figure he had just shot dead in his bedroom was now getting up, his wounds clothing themselves as the bullets harmlessly fell away. "So I can take that as a no," the figure asked. His eyes were finally visible, a deep crimson red like the pits of hell, and yet cold as death. "What the fuck?" He moved with such speed Kolinsky couldn't even react as he was thrust against the wall and held there by the stranger's hand. The force of the strike nearly crushed his windpipe as the monster clutched his throat menacingly. "You know, I'm actually pleased that you declined my offer, Anthony," the stranger hissed. "Resourceful and connected scum like you could manage your operations even in a jail cell, couldn't you? You are a cancerous growth on society, and nothing short of a removal will cure this disease." Kolinsky kicked and tried to scream, but only managed a single choked phrase. "Who the fuck are you?" The stranger smiled, and at last Anthony could make out more about him. He removed his hood to reveal a masculine face, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s. He had black hair, messy from the hood but cut short. He had pale skin, and there was the presence of a small, trim beard on his chin and under his nose. But that was where the normal attributes of a man would end and the features of horror began. He smiled, his canine teeth exposing themselves as longer and sharper than the rest, revealed the pointing, menacing fangs. And of course, there were those terrifying blood-crimson eyes. The dignified way he stood and acted, the cold and haunting stare he gave, the refined but bloodthirsty tone of his voice, and the fangs dripping with intent. The young man merely smiled as he gave a polite bow of his head. "I am Dracula. It is a pleasure, Anthony Kolinsky. And now, if you'll excuse me, let me see if your blood is truly as cold as I have heard." The last sound that could be heard from Anthony Kolinsky's apartment was a sound of a blood-curdling scream, and then silence. Louise Lovelace and Freddie Jackson both turned themselves into the police the very next morning before the sun had risen, both shaking with terror and sweating so profusely that they drenched their shirts and pants before arriving at the precinct. They told the police everything they found in the apartment that morning when they woke up, and that story, so far-fetched, drove the police to investigate for sheer curiosity, if nothing else. When the police arrived on the scene and investigated the apartment, they found a corpse on the ground, drained of blood and with a stake through his heart. The face of cold-blood Kolinsky, strewn and twisted into an expression of mind-shattering terror. His neck was ripped open at the throat, and his pale skin was thin and papery. On his chest, taped to the stake, was a letter written in very fine calligraphy. "I am the Revenant King. While I reign, the wicked will find only death perched upon the rooftops with brooding wings. Let them fear the dark in which they hide, for their shelter shall be their tomb." Signed, Count Dracula. That is chapter 1. Give me a second. Hey, Hannah. Hey, Aaron. How y'all doing? All right. Chapter 2. Reopen. It closed itself. 1 second. There we go. Got it. Chapter 2. Rachel Kim sat quietly in the hard wooden chair, strumming her fingers on her knee as she listened to the news anchor, chattering on about another death at the hands of this Dracula killer. She'd heard all the news she needed to, and frankly, she was growing weary of it. The news, as usual, amounted to the same end result. Nothing new. It had been 3 weeks since the first killings had started, and the city was now close to a panic. Mayor Jonathan Flowers had assured the city he was doing everything in his power to catch the vigilante. Everything he could usually included angry calls up to the police commissioner demanding results and information which, as usual, the police were unable to provide. But that was what she was doing in the captain's office now. Police Captain Owen Brown stared at the screen as the mayor delivered his address to the news reporters. "It is a disgrace that some lunatic would run unchecked in our city, killing anyone he sees fit. I'm making it a top priority to catch and arrest this man, whoever he is. The police are organizing a team specifically for doing just that as we speak," the mayor said firmly and with enough emotion in his voice to sound sincere and passionate, but Rachel had been on the force long enough to know when someone was faking tears and sentiment. He was about as moved as a mountain from its base. "Mr. Mayor, do you think there's any validity to this Dracula killer? Could he be something supernatural?" Or Amanda, as a competent journalist, I believe you know the answer to that question. "This man or woman, whoever they are, is nothing more than a killer. A normal, very human killer. He can call himself what he likes, but in the end, he is a criminal. And a criminal will always be just that, and I will not tolerate this kind of barbarism in my city." Mayor Flowers cut off the reporter, Amanda, with a wave of his hand. "But, Mr. Mayor, why do you think he would use the Dracula name? What does that gain him?" Amanda tried to press him. Mayor Flowers rolled his eyes. "I can't say for sure, Amanda. Maybe he thinks it gives him fame and reputation, or perhaps he gets off on the glamour. Whatever his reasons, it doesn't change the fact that we are going to catch him and stop him." What about the fact that there's been targeting only mobsters, drug lords, and rapists? Do you think he's trying to be a vigilante, Mr. Mayor? Is he attempting to help and support the city and its people? Another reporter asked during the brief moment of pause. You know, my grandfather used to say that people who truly care about a community don't break the rules of that community to protect it. And he would say, "That's enough of that," the captain groaned, cutting off the TV. "As usual, that prick is in love with the sound of his own voice, and I'm tired of hearing it." He spun around in his chair to finally look at Rachel, and he snorted disapprovingly. Rachel Kim had known Captain Brown for years, and in all that time, she couldn't think of a single moment where the man looked genuinely happy. He had a face not unlike a bulldog with a permanent frown. His mouth was slightly hidden by his black mustache, and his hair was combed over to hide his thinning, though not doing a very good job. A double chin was just starting to form under his jaw, but he was far from being an unappealing or ugly fellow. Somehow, he just always gave off this stern demeanor, not unlike a disciplinarian at school who's merely waiting for the moment that you step out of line. An apt description of Captain Owen Brown, if ever there was one. He adjusted his collar and loosened his blue tie slightly before speaking. "I'm sorry, I wanted to hear our fearless leader if he had anything to say about this case. So, what did you want to talk about, Detective? We've got a team briefing in 5 minutes, so you better make it quick."
Yes, sir," Rachel spoke up swiftly, sitting up straight and speaking clearly. "Sir, with all due respect, why do you want me on this team?"
"What kind of question is that, Kim?" Captain Brown grunted. "You're a fine detective with an impressive record. And besides, you mentioned you read Dracula in high school, right? That gives you an edge."
Rachel snorted and shook her head dismissively. "Me along with everyone else in my English class, and I'm sure there are other officers who've read it too," Rachel explained.
Captain Brown looked her up and down for a moment. He paused as if taking her in, and it made Rachel turn her eyes downcast. She knew how she appeared to him and everyone else. Rachel Kim was short, only about 5'4", with a Korean ethnicity. She could speak Korean fluently, but since she'd been raised in America, she had no difficulty with English. Her black hair was tied back in a ponytail behind her, hanging just to her back, and her body, while not overly curvaceous, was at least appealing. She got enough attention from some of her male colleagues to gather that much. However, Captain Brown had never made any inappropriate advances or insinuations upon her person. In fact, he was one of the few men in the precinct she never felt like she had to worry about harassment from. A lecture or a reprimand? Certainly, but never harassment. After taking her in, Brown then made a move towards his filing cabinet. He brushed through it at efficient speed and pulled out a manila folder, dropping it open. Rachel tried to see the contents, but sat back as she saw her own face, staring back at her from a photo in the folder. It was her personnel file. "I put you on this team," Captain Brown explained, "because everything I saw in this file showed me you were the woman for the job. Now, are you saying you don't want to be on the team? Are you requesting a different case?" Captain Brown asked, standing up to grab his coat off the rack. It was getting late, and he was itching to go home after the briefing. Rachel could understand that.
"No, I'm fine being on the Dracula Killer team so long as I get some things cleared up."
"Like what, exactly?" Captain Brown asked.
Rachel hesitated a moment before speaking. She then gave a faint cough and looked down at her knees, shame etched on her brow. "Sir, I just want to know that you didn't do this as some favor because of what happened with my brother."
Captain Brown paused as he put on his coat, and his eyes narrowed as he looked once more at Rachel. There was an annoyance in his gaze, but also something coming very close to sympathy. "Trust me, kid. This has nothing to do with your brother," Captain Brown grumbled.
Rachel didn't say anything in response. She simply listened to hear if there was any lie in his voice. She didn't hear it, and that gave her some comfort. Every cop in the precinct, maybe even every cop in the city, knew about her brother, Andrew Kim. Their familiarity with him led to early assumptions about her that made her more than a little uncomfortable. The last thing she ever wanted was to be labeled because of him. Captain Brown continued. "Look, if you like, I can take you off the case right now and put you back behind a desk." "No, sir, I want this."
"Good. Then shut up and let's get to the briefing."
As he walked by, Rachel stiffened slightly and followed the captain out of his office. The air was stale and the atmosphere stuffy in the precinct. Many of the normal officers and staff had gone home, but around 10 or 12 remained behind in the middle of the office space, murmuring and talking amongst themselves. A few turned in Captain Brown and Detective Kim's direction as they walked in the room. Some smiled, some growled, at least one yawned. Rachel knew a handful of them, but others she didn't even recognize as they weren't part of this precinct. It looked like Captain Brown was reaching out to gather as many able-bodied and willing officers and detectives as he could manage. As the captain took his place in front of the group, he cleared his throat, waiting for Rachel to take her seat. She found her way to an open office chair and plopped down in it, not making eye contact with the blonde officer near her. "Hey, Rachel," he whispered. "Hey, Robert," she nodded with a smile. Officer Robert Grayson was probably one of the few officers who either didn't know about her relation to Andrew or he didn't care. In fact, if she had to hazard a guess, she suspected he had a crush on her. Robert was in his mid to late 30s with blonde hair and light brown eyes. He was a fair-skinned man who seemed intent on trying to grow a beard, but the result was patchy and rather unimpressive. He was an all-around friendly person, though, so Rachel had no reason to tell him off or to avoid him. If she was honest with herself, while she didn't have feelings for him like he might for her, she was grateful for his kindness in a workplace that seemed content to give her ugly looks otherwise. A sort of oasis in a desert. "All right, it's late, so I'm going to make this real quick," Captain Brown called out, turning to Robert and Rachel's attention back to the front of the pack, where the captain was standing on a desk so he could overlook the entire assembly. "The mayor is twisting the commissioner's arm, and so that means he's twisting mine too. Word from up top is we are to catch the Dracula killer as soon as possible and by any means legally applicable. And as for what we know," Captain Brown turned to a whiteboard he had stationed just behind him and indicated the scrawlings he'd made on it. It was very bad handwriting, but Rachel was used to reading the near illiterate scribblings of her own parents' handwriting, so she could just make out some of the words. She didn't need to read it, though, as Brown was more than willing to summarize the text for them. "The Dracula killer only seems to target criminals and dangerous felons. Normally, I might be tempted to shake the bastard's hand for that, but right before I slap a pair of cuffs on him." This got a buzz of laughter from the listening police. Rachel didn't smile. She just stared ahead. "But the fact remains that while in this city, you don't take the law into your own hands, undead or otherwise." An officer amongst the group raised his hand to speak. Brown nodded him. "Hey, what evidence have we even seen that he is a vampire?" he called. "None, because he isn't," Brown snapped back impatiently. "Well, sir, isn't it true that several of his victims have been drained of blood prior to being killed?" Another detective officer. "I heard about some survivors claiming he was made of shadows or something," a female officer added on the other side of the room, giggling to herself while looking at her phone. "One even swore it was a giant bat." A few snorts and snickers erupted. "Well, I didn't know Bruce Wayne moved to the Big Apple." Half the men and women in the room burst out laughing. "That's enough, all of you!" Captain Brown shouted, bringing the room to quick order. "Rumors don't mean shit to me, and the evidence concerning blood loss is not enough to convince me of anything. It's possibly drains the victim's blood ritualistically in order to sell the idea of the Dracula persona. Something I'd expect those media buzzards to lap up, but not you, not us. Maybe you all forgot that we're cops. Our job is to seek the truth through evidence, not through rumors, and I expect you to remember that." The room nodded their reluctant agreement, though many still bore amused smiles and smirks on their faces. "Brown's on a roll, huh?" Robert whispered. "Something like that," Rachel whispered back. She wouldn't voice her personal thoughts out loud. She'd learned it's best to stay low in situations like this, and to not draw attention to herself. Besides, she didn't need everyone here thinking she was crazy or stupid. "But the thing is, gang, that's not what worries me," Captain Brown continued, turning back to the whiteboard and circling a large red marked point. "What worries me is how this vigilante is getting his hands on the names of our targets. He doesn't just know who they are. He knows their hideouts, their warehouses, where to hit them where it hurts. That is not intel just anyone can get access to. He's got intel that could only be found by us. I hate to admit it, but I suspect we have a mole in our midst." Rachel tensed up a little as a few eyes glanced in her direction. She tried not to flinch at their glances and glares. She knew why they did. She knew why they were giving her the stink eye. When the Dracula killer had first appeared and began taking down criminals, mob bosses, rapists, and dealers, she'd actually been one of the few who praised his actions. It was hard to hold some resentment towards her for siding with a criminal. Maybe it's cold of her to think, but she couldn't bring herself to feel sympathy for lowlives who make their living off of other people's pain. Wasn't her job in the police to protect people? To help people? Sure, maybe this Dracula killer was going too far, maybe, but she couldn't see at all of what he did as negative. "Now, I chose this team," Captain Brown continued, seeming to have noticed the rush of icy sneers and cold growls aimed at Rachel, "because I trust you. All of you. I've gone through your files, your case records, and your experience. You're all exemplary officers and detectives with spotless records. No one in this briefing, in this room, is the mole. I'm sure of it." "So he says," one detective grumbled. Detective Keller. He shot one more glare at Rachel before turning back to the meeting. Rachel sneered back at him but said nothing. Like I said, Detective, none of you are the mole. But because we might have one somewhere in the police force, everything we talk about in these meetings is to be kept in-house. You can't discuss this case with your partners, with your local COs, not even with your families if you can avoid it. As the night began to sink in outside, an ominous glow seemed to settle down on the precinct, sending nervous chills through the room. Any merriment and humor that came from before was now all but washed away by the setting sun. Now, tomorrow I'll start assigning specific tasks for all of you. Keep an eye on your emails for further instructions. Now, before you leave, I'll be giving each of you a copy of the case file with all evidence and information we've gathered on the Dracula killer. Some of it hasn't been released to the public, and it's important that you stay informed. Read it, get familiar with it for the next few days. Before the captain could continue what he was saying, he was interrupted by the ringing of his cell phone. He paused and pulled it out to look at the caller ID, sneered at him, and put it away. Sorry, scam caller. As I was saying, I want this bastard caught by the end of the month. Any questions? Captain, I know you covered this earlier, sir, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, we're assuming that the whole vampire thing is just a stunt, right? Not the real deal? One detective chuckled. Look, anyone can borrow a name and claim there's something they aren't, the captain snapped. This animal gets his publicity and fame off of his name, so don't go buying into it. Anything else? Just to clarify, sir, Rachel finally grumbled, all eyes snapping in her direction. Do you want us to stake out crime lords and mob bosses to ensure their safety? Brown narrowed his eyes and his mustache bristled as his lip curled slightly. Is this assignment putting a bitter taste in your mouth, Detective? He asked. Rachel just shook her head and looked away. We protect the public, even if certain folks among that public are reprehensible. Does anyone here have a problem with that? No, sir, the room echoed back, bringing a satisfied smile to Brown's face. Good. That's what I like to hear, he smiled. Now, the next item on the... He paused as his phone suddenly rang again. A few officers chuckled at this as he lifted up to see the caller ID, and his eyes flashed angrily. How the hell do they get these numbers? He muttered. Maybe Dracula could take out the scam artist next, Robert teased. This got a few snickers before Brown slammed his hand on the whiteboard to shut up his jovial team. Shut up! All of you! And speaking of phones, it's important that everyone here give me their number so we can keep in constant communique. The key to finding this guy is to make sure that our intel is airtight and not and out of his reach. So we got to stay up to date with each other at all. Oh, God damn it all! His phone was ringing again and he lifted it up. I'm sorry, everyone. Apparently this scammer has no idea who he's calling, and I'm about to give them a piece of my mind. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Good night. Stay safe. Meet here at 9 tomorrow night. If you have a night tour, let me know by email and I'll contact your superiors. You're dismissed. As the room began to disperse, the captain was cursing under his breath about calls from unknown caller IDs and the pointlessness of telemarketers and scammers. Hey, Rachel, you leaving too? Robert asked. Rachel turned to glance at him, almost forgetting he was there for a moment. Actually, I needed to speak to the captain. Want me to wait on you? We could grab a drink and... I'm sorry, Robert, not tonight, she said sympathetically. Robert's face flashed a downcast expression, but then shrugged and smiled. Yeah, can't blame a guy for trying, I guess. All right, no problem. See you tomorrow, he said, trying to mask his disappointment. Rachel frowned as he walked away, feeling somewhat guilty for turning him down so quickly. He was a nice guy and didn't deserve that, but at the same time, she had enough on her mind as it was and didn't want to just string him along for something she wasn't really interested in. She waited a few moments to ensure no one was around to hear her before approaching the captain again, who was growling at his phone. Captain, sir? What is it, Kim? He asked quickly, not even looking at her. I know I haven't exactly been private about my feelings on this matter, but you really think I'm not the mole? Captain Brown finally turned his warm, dark eyes to her, and his expression did soften a moment. No, I know you aren't the mole, Detective, he said firmly. I've heard the rumors about you, but that's all they are. They're not. You are not your brother. Okay? I'm going to repeat that as many times as it takes. You're not your brother. But the rumors themselves present us with an opportunity. An opportunity? Rachel asked. My hope, Detective, is that the mole will seek you out specifically because of your feelings on this matter. You might have some unsavory outlooks in this case, but you're a good cop with good instincts. When push comes to shove, I know you'll do the right thing in the end. All right? Now, if you don't mind, I'm about to chew out this dipshit. Thank you, sir, Rachel sighed, a little relieved to hear it. Perhaps she was only being used to bait out the mole, but at least her being on this team wasn't for the reasons she feared. That at least put her mind and heart at ease. Rachel turned to leave as she heard the captain raise the phone to his ear to start screaming at the telemarketer, and she really didn't want to hear any of that. He wasn't fun to be around when he was angry, so she decided to tune him out and hurry out, pulling her coat over her shoulders and reaching into her pocket for her phone to check messages. Back in the office, Captain Brown waited with angry eyes and flared nostrils until at long last the phone rang again with that same wretched number, and this time he answered. "I have half a mind to trace this call and arrest you myself, you miserable piece of—" Owen Brown. Captain Brown's body went slack, and his jaw loosened slightly, as his eyes seemed to dull in color. His shoulders slumped, as if his brain had stopped working at full capacity. He was like a man in a daze, a zombie of his former self. "Yes, master," he whispered in a near maniacally high tone. "Yes, I have another one for you, master. His name's Douglas Paulson, serial rapist who we haven't been able to peg down yet. Lack of evidence and no one willing to testify. Yes, master, we're sure it's him, but the DA can't build a solid case. Yes, he prefers to slit his victims' throats, but any that he fails to kill are too scared to testify against. Yes, master, of course. I'll have all of his last known addresses for you first thing tomorrow. No, I'll send them to you tonight, master. I'll bring them to your usual location. Yes, thank you, master. Thank you." As the line hung up, Captain Brown blinked a moment, his eyes regaining their usual fire. His body shook a moment as he winced and looked around. Who had he been talking to? He didn't remember. Maybe he'd been working too hard, or maybe he hadn't been getting enough sleep. Maybe he dozed off. But why was he holding his phone and standing if he dozed off? He started to walk to the door when he stopped. He felt a sudden distinct need to dig up the Paulson rape cases. He dug through the case files near his office, pulled out every folder he could on Douglas Paulson, still unsure what he wanted to look through them for. He still had work to do on the Dracula killer case, and there was already detectives trying to investigate this dirtbag. Just leave it alone, he thought. He should go home. No, for some reason, this was more important. I'll just head home and, no, I should stop by the bar first, get a drink, and maybe look over these files there. I've got time. Not like Dracula's going anywhere. He rubbed his head, feeling oddly sleepy and wishing to God he could remember who he'd been talking to. It didn't matter. Tomorrow was another day, a day of them getting closer to the Dracula killer and whoever this slippery little mole was in the police force. Chapter 2 is done. Give me a second, then we'll read chapter 3. All right, The Revenant King, chapter 3. What's a revenant? A revenant is another word for an undead. A revenant is another word for an undead. It's basically something that has come back to life or is unkillable. Yes, the captain is the mole, but he doesn't realize it. So, more on that later. All right, let's get into it. Chapter 3. The diner was called Lowlands Grill. It was run by an old country southern sort of fellow named Gregory, who spent most of his time in the back, his hand on a spatula and his other on a bottle, but be it alcohol, ketchup, or both, his hands were always full. He only emptied his hands to hug a friend who came to visit. Such was the case when Rachel walked in the front door. The hostess looked up from her desk to see Rachel and smiled, calling back, "Hey, Greg, it's the cops," she called. Gregory stuck his head out surprised and then burst into a huge smile. "Well, look who it is!" Rachel waved and smiled back. "Hey, Greg." "Hold on a sec. Oi, Paul, you man in the kitchen?" He shouted and hurried out to see Rachel. She opened her arms, knowing Gregory loved hugging his friends. The two embraced, and Rachel was overwhelmed by the sheer power of the hug and the smell of grease and meat on him. Gregory's unshaved face seemed to part as he smiled down at her. "Well, ain't you a sight for tired old eyes? Where you been, girl?" he asked. I only saw you 3 weeks ago, Gregory. That's too long. That's too long. Come on, have a seat. Let's talk. Let's talk. With a nod, Rachel joined Gregory in a nearby booth, and as the large man sat, he adjusted himself. He waved to a waitress walking by. 2 drafts, Anna, 2 drafts. You got it. I'm on the job, Greg. I can't drink, Rachel laughed. Then I have 2 for myself. You're not near as funny as you used to be. Now, where you been? What's been going on? Tell me everything. Rachel shied and shook her head. I don't have much time, Greg. Sorry. I actually came to ask you a few questions. I'm not in trouble, am I? No. I've been assigned the Dracula killer case. Greg's face went grave, and a cold sweat seemed to take him as he shivered softly. You're chasing that monster? Rachel, you need to get out of that. You need to get out of that right now. I have a job to do, Greg. What are you trying to prove getting killed by a damn vampire? He snapped. Rachel laughed. Greg, you can't be serious. That's all superstitious nonsense. I never thought you'd fall for that kind of thing. Healthy superstition can keep a man alive, happy, and longer, he challenged. Greg, she finally sighed, leaning forward and whispering, look, I know that you hear things, and I know that a couple of folks come through here from time to time with things they probably shouldn't. Now, your hands are clean on all that, so I never make a stink for you, but occasionally it's nice to get a little help now and again, you know? So, I won't make you, but I want to know if you've heard anything I can use, maybe some kind of lead. Greg fidgeted a little and grunted unhappily. You're a sweet girl, Rachel. You really are. Not like Andrew. Don't bring my brother into this, please. He's the last person I want to talk about. You know, is that why you're on the case? 'Cause of him? I don't think so. Oh, at least I hope not. The chief says it's not because of him, but I don't know, Rachel admitted. So will you help? Greg tapped his fingers on the table nervously, then finally pointed over his shoulder. You see that man sitting at the bar? He has a bandana on, a leather biker jacket? He asked. Rachel looked behind him and saw the man in question. He had filthy black hair and a scar under his jaw. He looked mean, nasty. He had the look of a man who'd probably killed before and had gotten away with it. Rachel didn't like the look, but there was more to him than that. There was something under the surface, a cold and calculated sneer to his aura. What? Do you think he's the killer? Oh, hell no, Greg snapped. Everyone knows vampires don't walk around in sunlight. Greg, but, he interjected, he's part of this gang called the City Wolves, and he's mentioned the Dracula killer once or twice. Said he knew the killer's favorite hideouts. Where? Well, I didn't ask, because I don't want to know. I just want to stay out of the way of that bunch. The City Wolves they're not good people, he grumbled. Then why even serve him here? Not my place to throw out a paying customer. Plus, I don't want him and his boys coming back for blood. Well, maybe I should talk to him. Rachel, Greg growled, taking her hand. You're brave, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm proud of you for that, but you're getting well over your head, lad. Don't bother him. What you do is you go back to your chief or captain or whoever and say you want off this case. Take a murder case or a theft case, but don't go chasing demons. Because when you chase demons, you're bound to chase them to hell. Thanks for the warning, Greg. But this is my job, Rachel replied, getting up and walking to the frightening biker at the bar. Excuse me, sir? The biker turned his head to her, and his blue eyes lit up with a hungry lust. Ooh-wee! What have we got here? You coming over here for little old me? I'd like to ask you a few questions. Ooh, I like questions. But I'll save you the trouble, man. I'm great in the sack, and I'm available whenever you want, and you are definitely my type. That answer your questions? Hardly, Rachel grumbled, pulling out her shield, flashing in front of the punk who just whistled at it. I'm a detective. Detective Rachel Kim. Ooh, this keeps getting better. All right, detective. Well, you can handcuff me if you like. I won't resist. Cute. And your name? Call me Ricky. Word is you know something about the Dracula killer? At this, the biker let out a barking laugh and slammed his fist on the counter, shaking his head, turning a few patrons in the bar and the diner in his direction. You're chasing that Looney Tune? He asked. Come on, honey. There's way better cases for you to crack. How about trying mine? Maybe another time. Listen, if you know anything about the Dracula killer, it would help me and my task force arrest him. Then I'd have more time for folks like you. Aw, well, you sure know how to make a guy feel wanted. Fine. Well, I don't know the guy. But I know a place I've seen a lot of bats. Bats? Well, don't you know vampires and bats go kind of hand in hand, sweetheart? You call that a lead? You're wasting my time. Sorry. Look. Real talk. Look, there's a place a few blocks away that I heard he was going to hit. And how do I know I can trust you? You were just spinning a load of crap a second ago, Rachel challenged. Look, the bloodsucker only hits rich elitist dudes and assholes, right? Criminal dirtbags and the like. Well, there's this guy I know named Mike Barnes, real rich asshole, and he's infamous for rigging professional sporting events to make a little bit of cash off gamblers. Real mean bastard. Frankly, no one would care if he got bumped off. Perfect target for your Dracula killer, right? Rachel raised an eyebrow but continued to listen. She'd heard the name Mike Barnes. There were more than a few active cases that had his name attached, and all of them had to do with the mob and gambling charges. Barnes could be a potential target for Dracula, if the pattern stuck. Truth is, old Barnes been laying real low lately, because he might be worried that Count Dracula's coming for him next. Now, I know where he lives, and if you want, you and I can stake out the place, and we'll nab old Dark and Creepy together, and maybe after that have a little bit of fun in the hay. What do you say? You're not police, and I'm not taking you with me to arrest him. But if what you say holds up, then I'll find some way to repay you. Oh, I have a few ideas. Within reason, pig, Rachel spat, regretting her promise immediately as Ricky howled with laughter. You know, I like you, detective. I really do. You know what? I'm going to do you a solid. He turned and started to get up, swigging his bottle in one gulp and slamming it back down, tossing a few dollars on the counter with it. Meet me at my place, 1941 Kurt Street. There's an alley there where me and the guys drink and hang out. Just say you're looking for Ricky, and I'll meet you there. Why not just tell me how to find Mike Barnes? Because I don't know where the fucker is myself, Ricky scoffed. I gotta do some sniffing around too, doll. But don't worry. We'll find him for you. Me and my boys are real good at sniffing things out. He grinned and walked past her, making sure to trace his fingers across her shoulder as he went. Later, babe. You all right, Rachel? Greg asked, hurrying over to collect the cash and check on her. Rachel nodded in reply. Gives me the creeps. Well, I told him not to get involved with him, but did he help you at least? He may have a lead on where Dracula will hit next, and I'm going to take it, Rachel replied. I can't go alone, though. I'm not that stupid. I'll take some of the guys from the task force with me. Maybe that'll keep Ricky's hands to himself. Rachel, look, I know this ain't what you want to hear, but maybe he's here for a reason. I've read his book, Greg. If this really is Dracula, then he's got no good reason for coming here. That's for sure. And if he isn't Dracula, which he isn't, then he's killing people and taking the law into his own hands, which is still wrong. You say that now, but stop and think a moment, okay? Don't you wish that Dracula would set his sights on someone like Ricky? Greg teased. Rachel stifled a giggle and shook her head. Okay, point made. Dogs like him really put me on edge, but I still have to trust him for this. 1941 Kurt Street. That ain't a great part of town, Greg grumbled. You sure you don't want to call this off? Not a chance. I have to... Hey, Greg, phone for you, a waitress called. Greg smiled and pat Rachel's shoulder encouragingly. I know. You're going to do what you got to do regardless of what I say. Just please stay safe, all right? You're one of the better cops out there, you know. I'd hate to lose you. Take care of yourself, Greg, Rachel giggled as she started to walk to the door. Greg waved goodbye as he picked up the phone to see who was calling. She glanced back to see that his expression was still smiling, but there was a seriousness to it now. Ah, Miss Lafanu. Yeah, pleasure as always. No, I don't know anything about... Well, that's neither here nor there. Rachel closed the door behind her, waving off the uneasiness she saw in Greg's expression as he was on the phone. She made her way back to the car, but was actually more aware of the time of day now. It was now 6 o'clock. The sun would be setting soon. Rachel had never dreaded the night, nor had she ever been scared of the dark, but as the shadows began to grow longer and the day began to creep into evening, a shiver ran down her spine, and she double-checked the locks on her doors as she went to her apartment to rest for the evening. All right. Chapter 4. Sorry, I needed a drink. All right. We still good? Make sure that I got this. Okay. All right. Ready for chapter 4? Make sure we're all ready. This one's a little shorter, but it should be good. All right. Here we go. We back? What happened? Did something happen? Did y'all lose connection or something? Hold on, let me double check something. Okay, seems to be working. Okay, we're good. All right. All right, here we go. The Revenant King, chapter 4. I'm telling you no, the chief snapped angrily at Detective Kim, who was wincing at his anger. Chief, you told us to pursue all leads on the Dracula killer, and this is a lead. A lead? You call this a lead? Some biker punk with a rap sheet as long as my forearm tells you he knows where Dracula will hit next, and you just trust that? They had been at this conversation for 30 minutes. After meeting that punk, Ricky, Rachel Kim couldn't shake the conversation from her mind. Maybe he was just a flirty dirtbag. But he'd had a lead. A real lead. He knew a potential target, and after doing a little personal snooping, found out that Mike Barnes did have a history of illegal number running, gambling dens, and race rigging. Just the kind of punk that Dracula would gun for. Though he hadn't hit any of Barnes' properties or gambling dens yet, she knew that if she could get ahead of him, she might catch him. But only if Ricky knew the details. Even so, she knew better than to trust the say-so of some street punk like him, so she wanted backup for this one. She wanted to approach the chief to organize a SWAT team to accompany her, and the minute she'd explained where her information had come from, he had nearly blown his top. We use inside informants all the time to catch criminals, she replied, her body shivering a little. It was a sign that her adrenaline was shooting up. Her heart was beating, and her voice was trembling. She was getting more afraid and angry at the same time. She was never good at arguing, especially not with the chief. Oh, don't start with me, Kim, the chief snarled. For God's sake, you can't compare our informants on the street with this shit stain. This Ricky fellow sounds like a think and smells like a problem. He had no respect or fear for the Shield, which means he doesn't fear the police. He's used to getting his way, and he's not having to face the consequences. It means he's arrogant, Kim shot back. It means he's experienced, the chief retorted. Arrogant criminals don't last long enough to laugh at the Shield, but once you've avoided the law long enough to know a thing or two, those punks could laugh at the commissioner himself. Fine, then what do we do? Just ignore this obvious chance? This isn't a chance. It's not a lead. It's an obvious setup, the chief snapped. The matter's dropped, understand? I'm not risking you or other members of this department on this fool's errand. But what if he's telling the truth, boss? Kim finally cried. What if he really does know where Dracula might hit next? This could be our chance to get ahead of him. Mike Barnes is every bit the scum we know Drac would go for. The chief huffed in frustration, then began grumbling into his knuckle, a habit of his when he was wanting to argue but didn't have anything smart to say. Listen, even if he is on the level, which I doubt, then I suppose Barnes might be at least worth a glance. Thank you, Chief. Kim sighed with relief until the chief raised his finger. You, however, are going home and getting some sleep. But there was a ring. The captain looked at his phone and growled. I have to take this. One moment. He took the phone and held it to his ear. Yeah, how can I... Oh, yes. Yes. He muttered slowly. Kim's eyebrow raised a little at how the captain seemed to go a bit more rigid. Was it the commissioner? Was it the chief of departments? No, of course not. I was just talking to my detective about that. Yes, she's right here. Of course. Of course, yes, sir. He then hung up the phone and shook his head as if he'd just gotten out of a shower and was getting used to the new chilly air. Ugh. Sorry, weird feeling all of a sudden.
Who was that, sir?
Not important. I need you to go home and rest, detective. That is an order.
But why? I could still be of some...
I wasn't asking. I brought you onto this task force because I trust you. I know you're not your brother, nothing like him, but taking tips and advice from criminals and con men? Are those the action of a good cop? Or someone like your brother? Rachel went stiff and bit her lip in embarrassed rage as the chief glared her down from behind his desk. You think I think it will send the wrong kind of message. I'm doing this for your own good. You need to step back, take a deep breath, and think about this. Go home, rest, forget about this Ricky fella, and let us do some investigating into Barnes. If anything turns up, we'll contact you. Deal? The chief then picked up his phone before she could answer. Now I have a call to return. You are dismissed, detective. Kim sighed and shook her head, knowing there was no use arguing anymore. Besides, she felt positively exhausted from her adrenaline rush earlier. She turned and walked out of the office, closed the door behind her, and went back to her apartment. Her apartment was nicely kept, more clean than probably was typical of a New York apartment. Kim smelt the soft smell of eucalyptus as she walked in. Seems her fragrance plugins were working. She inhaled slowly and let out the aroma fill her up as she tossed her bag on the couch and took off her jacket. She groaned, still feeling the fatigue of shouting at the chief. She certainly wasn't used to that. Well, no, that's not entirely true. She'd raised her voice a few times at him before, and it always ended the same, because he'd win. She was terrible at arguing, and even interrogating. She was always too polite, never wanting to rile up anyone. She usually let her partners or other cops handle that kind of stuff. Anytime she started, she'd just get worked up and then stutter or sound silly. She plopped down on her recliner and groaned. The gentle sound of claws on panel met her ears as a small white cat came scurrying over, mewing sweetly. Oh, hey, Noelle. Kim smiled, patting her lap for the cat to jump up. She did, swiftly, curling up in Kim's lap as if she were just a simple cushion. Kim stroked the animal's soft fur as it purred, and she sighed in satisfaction. At least you're not going to argue with me today, right? No answer, which was how she liked it. God, I need a break. No, what I need is answers. Kim looked around and groaned. This place was so clean, it made her mad for some reason. Why did she always have to have things so clean and orderly? Why couldn't she be more slovenly like her co-workers? They all had the respect of the department. They all could live more laid back and laugh beside the vending machine and not get ugly looks just because of who their shitty family was. She winced at the thought of her brother and closed her eyes. I thought this was it, Noelle. Kim along. I thought this Dracula killer case would help redeem me. Did I try too hard, maybe? Noelle didn't answer. She just purred. Chief Davis is right. No good cop would trust someone like that biker punk. Noelle's head turned and gazed up at Kim with big blue eyes that made her smile. What? You think I was right? You think the chief is just a big meanie? Is that what you think, fuzzy baby? Noelle meowed in response, and Kim tickled her fur, making her squirm a little in pleasure. Aw, thanks, Noelle. What would I do with that? Wait. She paused a moment and then thought back a moment. Ricky said something about Barnes laying low. He was afraid of Dracula, right? Her eyes narrowed and brushed her hair out of her face and scratched Noelle's knee absent-mindedly. If he's scared of Dracula, then that means Dracula's contacted him, which means we're running out of time. Even if Ricky is a dirtbag, he's the only way to get close to Barnes. Noelle pawed at Kim to get her to keep petting her, but Kim was already lost in thought and thinking. This Dracula, he follows the same pattern. First, he sends a warning. If the target doesn't react to the warning, he hits an area or person of importance. He does this one or two more times, and then if no change happens, we find the target dead, usually impaled and blood drained. She stood up as Noelle let out a soft hiss, frustrated at not being able to stay in her lap. And if he's already contacted Barnes, what were his demands? To turn himself in? But Barnes hasn't contacted the police. Ricky said that Barnes was getting scared, but that means he's tightened his security, so how many warnings has he gotten? Why haven't we heard about it? She walked to the window and stared out at the skyline. The sun was starting its slow descent. The city lights would begin to come on soon. Just the kind of night a vampire would choose to go hunting. Or at least someone pretending to be a vampire. Ricky's a creep, but he's the only one who can get me ahead of Dracula, she whispered. She then looked down at Noelle, who was swishing her tail back and forth curiously. If I do this, I'm taking a big risk. Maybe the chief is right. Maybe I'm acting too much like my brother. She bit her lip and her eyes narrowed in frustration. Damn it all. What do I do? She stared out the window, pressing her forehead to the glass as the cool sensation ran down her body. As the sky began to turn a soft and warm orange, her eyes caught the light of the sun, and she felt a shiver run down her spine as she saw the reflection of herself in the window. She looked for the briefest moment, somehow otherworldly. It was wrong somehow. What monsters lay just beyond that glass? She giggled to herself at how silly she was being. There were no monsters. There are no vampires or creatures of the night. Just a vigilante. A murderer who was breaking the law, and it was her job to catch him, whether she liked it or not. I'm not my brother. One way or another tonight, I'm finding Dracula. She turned. Wish me luck, Noelle. She's turning back to grab her coat. I have a date with a vampire tonight. Noelle simply meowed after her. She began walking towards the door. Captain Brown was locked up in his office when his phone rang again. Without bothering to check his caller ID, he just put the phone to his ear and replied, Captain Brown, good evening. The voice sent a chill down his spine. It caused his blood to curdle and his mind to go fuzzy. He felt his jaw go slack, and for a moment he forgot everything. Forgot who he was. Forgot what he was doing, what he was thinking. All he knew was that his master was speaking. Hello. Yes, I was expecting your call. Forgive me, I have the information you asked for, and I made sure no one will interfere with you tonight. Was anyone interested? The voice asked. One, a detective named Rachel Kim. She's on the task force. She somehow got a lead that pointed her to Barnes. Oh, did she? It's nothing to worry about, Master, he said. She's a good cop. I told her not to get involved with your business, and she won't. How did she find out about this? Some punk biker, she said. Talked to her about it. Said he knew. Told her not to listen to people like that. Not worth it, but best I could do to throw her off. I sent her home for the evening. She won't be a problem, Master. When I hang up this phone, Captain, you will go home and get some sleep. In the morning, you will resume your duties as normal. And Detective Kim will not be clocking in. Create a reason. Master, I said she wouldn't bother you. I know what you said, the voice said. Now you will heed what I have said. Is that clear? Of course, Master. I live to serve you, Master. Good. You will not remember this call. You will only vaguely remember Detective Kim calling you to tell you that she's sick and won't be coming to work for some time. Yes, Master. Absolutely, Master. And what shall you do, Master? I will go and prepare. I have a feeling I shall be entertaining some uninvited guests. The phone then clicked off, and Captain Brown shivered, his eyes blinking rapidly as if he'd been daydreaming. Ugh, damn. I need more sleep. I need to stop zoning out like that. He then noted his cell phone in his hand. Was he on call? He remembered the phone ringing. Oh, right. Kim called. I gotta pull myself together. Gotta stay sharp. Shame about Rachel being sick, but, she could use a few days' leave. Poor thing works herself too hard. He gave a yawn and walked on, thinking about how Rachel Kim was overly ambitious. She's got to realize we'll catch the Dracula killer and this mole in no time. She just needs to learn some patience and stop taking advice and direction from strange people off the street. Some time in bed might help clear her head. As he walked to the elevator to head down to the parking garage, the sun finally set on New York City. And that was chapter 4. And that was the last chapter that I have completed editing. Now, I will ask you, my readers, I can read the next chapter or two if you want, but be warned they have not been fully edited yet, so they are not complete. Would you like me to read the next 1 or 2 chapters? Let me know in the chat, and I will decide after I get a drink. In fact, let me run to the bathroom while we're on a break, and let me know in the chat if you want me to read any more. For real. All right, I'm back. All right, so we got 2 votes for the next chapter. 3 votes. Hannah says to save it. McMicah's leaving. What reason is Dracula using Brown for besides Leeds? So Dracula has hypnotized Chief Brown. To like, not a spoiler, but he's hypnotized him. In the book Dracula, Dracula hypnotized people to be informants for him or to get information or things for him. So Chief Brown has no idea that that's what's going on. All right, Brother Lordcat says to wait as well. Another wait. Yeah, okay, we'll save it. Short stream tonight, guys, but thank you for joining me all the same. Honestly, I did enjoy it. It was nice to read this, but I've got some more edits to make before we do any more. Right now, let me take a look at something. I have the first 7, like I said, the first 4 chapters are done being edited. I have chapters 5, 6, and 7 in the process of being edited, and the rest isn't even close. So it's going to be a long time before I fully get the story ready for publication. But this is the next story I want to get published for sure. So we will read as much of this as we can. Okay, guys? So that is what we're going to do. Dracula's public domain. Yeah. Oh, shoot. Have you seen Dracula and everything? Like, Dracula gets featured in a lot of shit. So, yeah, he's fine. But, yeah, what I wanted to do with this story, honestly, was sort of combine aspects of the real world Dracula, like the real Vlad Dracula, and the fictional Dracula, and I've created a really cool story. I actually can't wait until we get to chapter 6, because that's going to be really neat. It's where Detective Kim finally meets Dracula, and we get them clashing, and it's really, really cool. So I think you guys will like it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in my next video. Take care.